Hi, my name is Mike. I'm a design master at LEGO, and today I'm here to show you the LEGO Titanic. This model is a reproduction of the famous ocean liner RMS Titanic. The real ship was about 270 meters long, so this LEGO model is 135 centimeters long. It's enormous. It's 9,090 pieces, and we're capturing so much detail on this model at this enormous scale.
My name's Andy Skinner. I'm part of the education team at Sea City Museum here in Southampton. Titanic was built in Belfast by a company called Harland and Wolff. She was, in her day, the largest man-made moving object in the world. People said that she was unsinkable and almost like a floating palace.
If we take a short tour of the LEGO Titanic, I like to start from the bottom and then we work our way up to the smokestacks. So the hull from the outside seems like a quite simple, smooth shape. And this was quite a technical challenge to figure out how do we get the proper curves on the bottom and get the sharp point of the bow, and then having it expand from being a super thin line at the front to its widest point, I think is 18 modules. We don't have standard LEGO bricks that can do that. So we had to come up with some really clever geometry inside the hull, where we're building different triangles that all then join together to form this really beautiful shape. So then once you move up past that red section, you come to the waterline, and above the waterline, the Titanic is painted black. And this part of the ship is where we have all the portholes. There are hundreds of them.
So Titanic was home to about 2,200 people. About 900 of them are crew. And then there's accommodation for up to about 350 first-class passengers. We're going to make use of the most opulent and fancy and luxurious rooms. So I'm standing in a replica of what a second-class cabin would have been like on board the Titanic. It could be a bit chilly though, because the heating wasn't working properly. And then right down at the bottom, you've got the third-class passengers who are trying to make a new life in America. And so most of their cabins are at the bottom there.
And then on top of that, we have the superstructure. So in the front, we have the white forecastle. On this part of the ship, there's a lot of great detail.
Titanic has 3 anchors, one in the middle and then 2 on the side. And the central anchor is sort of placed in a little well at the front, quite close to the flag. And when they built this anchor, they needed 20 horses to pull it to Ireland.
Then there is a small crane that is used to install that anchor. That crane took a few different loops to just get the correct geometry and getting it looking exactly like the crane that was on the real Titanic. That was super fun to make. We have the forward mast with a lookout point, and then there's an American flag on the top of that mast. That flag has 46 stars because in April of 1912, the US flag only had 46 stars on it. This is the kind of level of detail that we're talking about in that model. After the bow, we have the well deck where you have cargo compartments, and then behind that well deck, you now have the bridge, which is one of the most iconic parts of the Titanic. There's a lot of kind of crazy sideways constructions to make sure that we have the right window patterns and the right shapes for the pilot houses on either side of the bridge.
And then just in front of the bridge, of course, you've got the crow's nest, where when Fred Fleet spotted the iceberg, he'd have rang a bell and then communicated down to the bridge by telephone and alerted them of the fact that they'd seen this iceberg, which was straight ahead of them.
As we work back along that superstructure, you have the promenade decks and the lifeboat decks. The 4 funnels of the Titanic were also a really great challenge for this model. They're built at just a slight angle, so we build this kind of clever construction inside the hull that allows us to angle those funnels and build up a nice structure that uses string to hold them down, just like they would be held down on the real Titanic.
My favourite fact about the Titanic is that her rear funnel was a dummy. So the front 3 all linked to engines, but this one doesn't. It was sort of there for show to make the ship look larger and more impressive. And what I love about it is inside the funnel, there was a ladder. We even know that a crew member, while the Titanic was sinking, scaled up this ladder, got out, spotted a lifeboat in the water, and then clambered down using a rope the side of the ship and jumped into the lifeboat.
This model is so large that for the experience of putting it together, we've split it into 3 sections. So you have the bow section, the mid section, and then the stern of the ship. And these 3 sections actually come in 3 separate boxes inside the large box, so you can build any one of those 3 sections completely by itself. You can actually pick the order that you want to build the ship in. We've designed this special key that is removable for connecting the 3 different sections together, and that releases the sections so you can slide them apart. And then we have cross-sectional details showing details like the swimming pool, some of the first class cabins.
It was fairly uncommon to have a swimming pool on a ship in those days. So there was a real novelty factor, people being able to go and have a dip. We know from her sister ship, the Olympic, that in bad weather it could be a bit ropey and the water would sort of sweep around a fair bit.
One of the details that is quite iconic for Titanic is this grand staircase. It runs from just above the boilers all the way up to the very top of the ship, and we've used a small decorated compass element as the Titanic clock at the very top of the grand staircase.
Behind me, we have a really good idea of what the grand staircase would have looked like. Several decks of sweeping staircase only for the wealthiest people. We know that in today's money, the most expensive rooms on the Titanic would cost maybe up to £70,000. And it really gives a sense of what life would have been like for the super rich in 1912.
Between the stern and the midships, that's where at the bottom we have the engine room, and this is part of the model that I am incredibly proud of. We've recreated Titanic's 3 engines. The piston engines are built using Lego Technic piston elements. When you turn the propeller, the pistons go up and down. There's 2 engines on each side, and you can pull those out and see the details of them. You can also then, if you look way down inside, you can see that 3rd low pressure turbine engine. And when you build the ship, that's the only time you'll ever actually get to experience what is going on in that low pressure turbine. So I'm going to leave that as a surprise for people that build the ship, because once you put it together, you can never take it out. It is buried so far down in the structure of the model. For Lego Titanic, we made a brand new element, a 1x2 brick with an inverse arch. We found uses for them in the grand staircase, in the hull. We found uses for them in the higher parts of the hull as well. So we have them in black, we have them in dark red, we have them in brown, and we have them in white in this model. Another detail in this model that I'm excited for is the flags. Our graphic designer, Joanna, designed the flags using a plastic foil, and then we print on one side of the foil, but because it's transparent, you can see the flag from both sides. It also means that we can make a super tiny but super detailed flag, which again is helpful in selling the scale of this massive, massive ship to have these very tiny flags. One of the details that I learned while building the model was about the lifeboats of the Titanic. They were quite a bit larger than would be on normal passenger liners. So the idea was that they could actually hold a lot more people than a standard lifeboat, but the crew of the Titanic had not been properly trained on the cranes that lower the lifeboats into the water. It's so incredibly sad to learn details like that about this ship. In this model, we've done all of our decorations as printed elements. So we have a 2x3 tile that's printed with Titanic that goes on the left and right sides of the bow. Then we have a 1x4 bow on the back of the ship with Titanic Liverpool printed on that. We have our decorated flags. We also have a 2x4 white bow where we print a 1 plate thick yellow line, and we use those 2 pieces on the front to complete that gold line that runs around the entire ship. One of the small details that I love on this model are the benches that we have on the top decks. We've built them using a 1x2 plate with bar and a 1x2 rail plate in brown, and it's a fun, tiny detail that you see scattered throughout the entire ship. I think it's an incredible model that is massive, but also has these small moments that will hopefully just make you smile when you put them together and see them on display.